Well, it can't really be CO2 because look how little the CO2 in the atmosphere has gone up, by 0.01% over the whole of the last 259 years. Then we have the fact that the CO2 concentration rise at the moment. It's rising at a rate which means that we'll only have added half as much to it between 2000 and 2100 as the UN imagines, if the current trend continues in the inset there all the way to 2100. And this result is something the UN can't explain. In its 2001 report, it admits it can't add up the so-called carbon budget, what happens to the CO2 when we put it in the atmosphere, to within 50% of the right answer. They don't know where it goes or why it goes there. And yet they claim 90% confidence that it is causing more than half the warming of the last 50 years. It's nonsense. Next important point, where there's a huge discrepancy between reality and what the UN imagines is happening, the sea has been cooling for 6 years. Because what we've done is we've done the kind of experiment I want to do on the land, and we've done it on the sea. We've actually put, not calorimeters, just temperature sensors, into buoys that can go down to a depth of a mile and come back again, reporting temperature and salinity to a satellite when they get to the surface, and then back they go down again to do it again. There are 3,319 of them scattered all over the oceans of the world. For the first time, we have an accurate impression of what's happening to global surface temperature of the oceans. It has been falling for the last 6 years. Falling by not necessarily very much, but it is falling, and yet the official theory, and all sides agree on this, predict that if we are adding CO2 to the atmosphere, 90% of the heat energy we trap in the atmosphere must end up in the oceans, where, as you can see, it is not actually found. And in fact, Douglas and Knox, in a remarkable paper of 2009, have reanalyzed something like 68 years of sea data, temperature and heat content data, and they have found no increase in heat content of the oceans throughout that 68 years. None. And that result, if it is upheld by other scientists verifying it, is fatal to the theory that CO2 could cause anything like the amount of warming the UN imagines. Here is another one. Who would like to do some nice equations? Not a single hand goes up. What an honest audience you are. Oh, there is somebody over there. Right. Well, okay, we'll have a look at one, shall we? Just one equation. This is the fundamental equation of radiative transfer. This is how you convert a change in radiative flux to a change in temperature. You multiply the emissivity of the Earth, roughly 1 with respect to long-wave radiation, by a constant, 5.67 times 10 to the minus 8th, that's the sigma there, times the fourth power of temperature gives you the change in flux. That's the equation. And it's a fundamental equation. It was discovered 100 years ago. It's been proven. It's a known result, one of the few known results in climatology. It's the only way you can convert changes in radiative flux to changes in temperature in the absence of temperature feedbacks. And the UN's climate panel does not mention it once, and we're going to see why it doesn't. Here is one of the ClimateGate emailers in one of the loci classici of their scientific presentation events. This is the global radiation budget, and he has plainly used, and indeed says he's used, the radiation equation that I've just shown you in order to work out how many watts per square meter are circulating at the surface, 390. That represents 288 Kelvin. That's what the equation gives you. But if you use that, then you take the first differential of that equation at the surface, and you find that you have to divide by 3, just for this one reason, all the UN's predictions of temperature change. I'm not going to take you through the argument in detail. As I said before, you'll be tested on it later. Now, the missing hotspot, this is one which Dr. David Evans is a star in explaining all over Australia. Now, the tropical upper air is not warming as predicted at thrice the surface rate. Here is the prediction. This prediction, of course, was made by the very man who rewrote that 1995 report of the IPCC so as to change its meaning 180 degrees and invent the problem they've been pretending existed ever since. He then found that actually unless you pretend that the tropical upper air warms at least 3 times the surface rate because of so-called anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, then you can't make out that CO2 causes very much warming. So he obligingly wrote a paper which was inserted in the IPCC's 2007 report. Here it is, showing that if the man-made greenhouse forcing is to blame, even if it's combined with all the other forcings on the page, you get that visible hotspot. You've got latitude this way, altitude that way. There's the hotspot in the tropical upper troposphere. That's what he predicts. And once he predicted it, once it was in the UN's documents, then of course all the other modelers saluted and obeyed. How are we going to get our grants? By signing up to the UN's theory, tampering with our models. We don't call it tampering, we call it intercomparison, and we all produce the same result. And here it is, 4 separate models, Lee et al. 2007, that's where I found this lot. But there is what actually happens in boring old measured, observed reality. Away from all the modelling, away from all the tinkering, away from all the inventions, the hotspot is where the question mark should be, or rather, it isn't where the question mark is. It isn't there. And that, on its own, means that you have to divide, according to Dick Lindzen, by at least 3. Once again, this factor of 3, the warming imagined by the IPCC. Now we can do a simple check of mathematics here. We know that the entire atmosphere has an effect of keeping radiation down here at a rate of 100 or so watts per square metre, raising temperature by not more than 20 Celsius in response. So that gives you a climate sensitivity parameter, which is about 1/5 of what the UN says it is. So now we're dividing by 5 this time. But each time we're seeing that the UN's result is simply an exaggeration. And here's the clincher, another observed result by Dick Lindzen of MIT and his colleague Young-Sang Choi, 2009, if you want the paper. Now I'm going to ask you a question, and we're going to take a vote. We're going to do it like the IPCC again. This is how we're going to do our science. If global mean surface temperature increases, will radiation escaping from the Earth to space, A, increase, B, remain unchanged, or C, diminished? Hands up for an increase. Quite a few. Remain unchanged. Just a few. Diminish. Even fewer. Hands up all those who didn't vote. And the majority of you didn't vote because you're an honest audience and you've learned how dangerous it is when I ask you to take a vote. So, congratulate yourselves. Come on, a round of applause because you were honest. Come on. So, in fact, the correct answer, according to the models of which you see 11 here, is that as the temperature increases, so the radiation escaping to space diminishes. That's what all the models say. But what I want you to do is to look at that blue panel in the middle of the screen and watch very carefully, because once again we're going to say, well, there's what the models say. Now we're going to look at observed reality using ERBI, our old friend, the Earth Radiation Budget Experiment Satellite. 3, 2, 1, ta-da! It doesn't look quite the same, does it? And this is what we're up against. Here you get models predicting what is simply not observed in reality. And the moment you make this correction, once again, you have to divide this time by 6 or 7, the warming effect from CO2. So look at the problems there that the UN has in its discrepancy between what they say is going on and what we have seen by measurement is going on in the real world. At all these points, we are verifying, to a very large extent, the original result we found based on Pinker's paper. So it seems to me that, Houston, the UN has got a problem. Not with our science, but with its science. It is collapsing and it has failed.